Hello everyone, welcome to the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission meeting for July 9th, 2019. Before we get started, I think we usually introduce ourselves, so let's go around the room. I'm Laura Hill-Eubanks, Chair of the Regional Planning Commission and the Northfield representative.
Bonnie Waninger, staff.
My name is Steve Knowlton. I'm sitting in. I'm visiting from the East Montpelier Energy Committee.
Alan Quackenbush, representative from Duxbury.
Byron Atwood, Baintown.
Don LaHaye, Wakefield.
Ron Kraus, Middlesex.
Lee Catania, Orange.
Jack Pauley, East Montpelier, alternate.
Phil Aaron, Worcester.
Ann Margolis with Department of Public Service presenting today. Not a resident of your Regional Planning Commission, but close in Corinne.
Janice Shatney, Berry City.
Michael Gray, Woodbury.
Dara Torrey, Moortown.
Julie Potter, East Montpelier.
Brennan Tobin, Plainfield.
Jan Olson, Callis alternate.
Kirby Keaton, Montpelier.
Claire Rock, staff. Amy Hornblass, Cabot.
Peter Carby, Washington. Jerry D'Amico, Roxburgh.
Nancy Chartrand, staff.
I'm Steve Lotspeech, Vice Chair of the Board of Commissioners and representing Waterbury.
Thank you everyone, welcome to our guests.
Yes.
And
Jan is the voting Callis Commissioner tonight.
okay, so we do have quorum. Before we get started, does anyone have any public comments that they want to offer to the board? Hearing none, we'll move on to our speaker, Ann Margolis, the Deputy Planning Director for the Department of Vermont Public Service, is going to talk to us about energy storage, which I think is a fascinating topic. And so take it away if you really.
So Ann Margolis with the Department of Public Service, and I work in the Planning Division of the Department of Public Service, which is the ratepayer advocate for the state of Vermont in utility regulatory matters. And we are also the State Energy Office and the energy planning outfit for the state. So we're the ones who put together and put out the state's comprehensive energy plan, which has the 90 by 2050 goal for renewability across all of our energy sectors, electricity and heat and transportation. So Bonnie asked me to come talk about energy storage. It sounds like there are at least several of you who are very interested in this topic, and as are we. And I say that with all earnestness because we have been studying it for several years now. There's a lot of energy storage activity going on in Vermont right now, which I will go through. And as we electrify a lot of our heating and transportation in an attempt to reach some of our renewability and greenhouse gas goals in Vermont, we are increasingly coming up against sort of a convergence of a lot of different parts of our economy, a lot of different options for how we get there in terms of technologies we deploy, whether we're actually deploying technologies or trying to get people to use certain technologies at certain times of day or certain times of the year. So it's really quite a big, interesting puzzle that we talk about quite a bit. So this is just one little piece of it. Some pictures here represent some of the energy storage technologies that have been deployed in Vermont to date. There's, at the residential scale, these are some of the Vermont units which have some solar and some storage on them, and they can be energy self-sufficient for, a day, or depending on, how much you're trying to do with your stored energy. These are the Tesla Powerwalls that Green Mountain Power is offering to its customers. Customers pay a certain fee and are able to get the resilience value during a blackout. You can call on the energy stored in your Tesla Powerwall. But it's cost effective for you because Green Mountain Power is also calling on the whole fleet of all of those batteries in all of those homes in order to reduce peaks on behalf of their customers. And reducing their peaks saves them money. So it saves all their customers money. This is a commercial scale battery, so at a business that may be trying to control some of the charges associated with high demand periods. And then this is the Stafford Hill Solar Plus storage project that Green Mountain Power built back in 2014 down on a landfill in Rutland, and it ostensibly has the capability to island the high school, which is an emergency shelter in Barre. It's also built on a landfill there. That capability has yet to be fully tested, so I just want to throw in that caveat. As we go on, next please. So back in 2017, we were directed by the legislature to study storage. The Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources had just come out with a big report called State of Charge on energy storage. And a lot of people were really jazzed about that report and wanted to understand sort of how Vermont could move in a similar direction to the ambitious direction that Massachusetts was plotting for itself in terms of storage. So, you know, to read all this, but really it just asked us to look at what's going on nationally, regionally, in the state with respect to storage. What are some of the jurisdictional issues? You know, storage is both, can look to the grid like generation, but it can also look like load. And we know how to regulate generation, and we don't regulate load. So what is this weird thing that kind of sits in the middle of those two things? Also to identify opportunities for and benefits of deploying storage, evaluate regulatory options, and figure out how we can get cost-effective energy storage deployed in the state. So we did that report. We had a whole bunch of working groups, and we wrote a draft, and then we got some more feedback, tons of comments. There's a lot of interest in the state in storage. And then we did a final report, which is available here on the Department of Public Services website. If you just go to our website, publicservice.vermont.gov, you can just search for energy storage report and you'll find it. And for the most part, all of our conclusions in that report are still valid and true. There's just been a lot more activity since then and a lot more learning that we've all had with respect to storage. So I've tried to update the slide deck from what we presented to the legislature back then. And we'll see if I made those updates today, so we'll see if I follow along with them all right. So the report covers benefits and costs. You might all know the costs of battery storage, particularly lithium-ion storage, are really coming down. So, you know, the costs we talked about in the report maybe were 2016 costs, and those are continuing to on a downward trajectory, just like we've seen solar panels decrease in cost quite a bit over the last decade. Talks about ownership options and how we can promote storage, how we can all participate in the benefits of it, whether it's owned by a resident, whether it's owned by a utility, whether it's owned by a third party in between who's trying to bring benefits to an end-use customer and the utility. There's a lot of different ways to deploy storage, and almost all of them are happening in Vermont right now. You know, the famous other considerations. Potential programs and policies to encourage storage in Vermont. One of the things that we were asked to look at was whether there should be a target for achieving a certain amount of energy storage in Vermont by a date certain. Massachusetts eventually set a target of 200 megawatt hours, and I think that's just under 1,000 megawatt hours. So we did discuss, and I'll get to it a little bit later, whether we should have a target in Vermont, but we don't have one. We didn't recommend adopting one, and we have seen a lot of growth in storage nonetheless. And then some recommendations, so we can keep going. So yeah, if you want to dork out on storage, I recommend going to that report. It's got a lot of good information that took us a lot of time. So the main point we wanted to make in our report was that we see energy storage as a means to an end. You know, when people talk about targets, they're saying, well, we just need a whole bunch of storage. We need storage, we need to get the market moving. Storage is great. We just know it's great, we want to get it deployed. We took a different tack, and we have a different philosophy in that we want to ask, why do we want to deploy storage? Are we trying to maximize use of the grid? Are we trying to smooth the fluctuations from solar and wind power? Are we just interested in solar as a backup, storage as a backup solution when the grid is down? You know, we don't think that you should look at a certain amount of storage without evaluating its end use and whether it's going to be cost effective when evaluated against other options. So that's kind of the tenor of the report. You'll see that throughout it, and we still think that that is, at the end of the day, what you want to be asking every time you think about something like a storage target. Next, please. One of the reasons we want you to think about that is because state energy policy requires us to pursue least cost solutions to a whole bunch of different needs for energy. So we want energy that's adequate, reliable, secure, sustainable, affordable, encourages the state's economic vitality, efficient use of energy resources, et cetera, but we want it to be cost effective and we want the least cost solutions. We don't want to deploy the most costly solution as a means to a particular end when it could be met with a lesser cost solution. Next, please. So when we think about storage, we think about lithium-ion batteries primarily because that's where the cost declines are coming right now, and that's what most people deploying storage are deploying. But lithium-ion batteries are not the only battery chemistry out there, and batteries are not the only form of energy storage. So, lead-acid batteries have been around for a long time. Pumped hydro has been around for a long time. We don't want to, let some of these fall off the proverbial plate as we just focus on lithium-ion. And there's other technologies that are evolving every day, very rapidly in this space. There's a whole bunch of R&D going on around different types of energy storage, particularly some of the mechanical forms of storage. That's just to say, have a wide view of storage, thermal storage as well. Next, please. Okay, so you probably, maybe if you think about storage a lot, you think about the Swiss Army knife type of metaphor, where let's just think about a battery, and not about those other technologies, but a battery can do a lot of different things. It can't necessarily do them all simultaneously, and to do one thing, like shaving peak for a utility, you may have to forego the ability to be fully charged up in the event of a power outage. So as you are considering whether it is cost effective or a good idea for you to deploy storage, you want to think about what are all the end uses you're trying to achieve from that storage, and are they complementary? So in general, right now, storage is being used for peak shaving by utilities. It's being used for some of the regional energy markets like frequency regulation, sort of keeping the grid going at an even wavelength, let's call it that, to integrate renewables, and for resilience, that's the backup power. Next, please. So the peak shaving benefit from energy storage, and this is kind of a busy chart, but basically on the left side, this shows the hourly demand from all of Vermont customers aggregated together. So Velco, which is our statewide transmission operator, this is what they see as the Vermont hourly demand. This is over the course of a year, and it's the blue, and this is the scale that goes with Vermont. And on the right side, which is the red, is the region. Vermont's interconnected with the region, all the other states in New England. There's a regional energy market, a regional transmission grid, and we're hooked right into it. There's not a single hour of the day in Vermont when we are energy self-sufficient. So we need to be pulling some of our electricity in from our neighboring regions, and we need to be pushing it out when it's more than what we need. So the whole energy system, both in Vermont, I'm talking about transmission primarily here, is sized to meet the peaks that happen in the region and happen in the state. So essentially, we built all our poles and wires to meet this highest level of demand, which right now in Vermont, it generally occurs after dark because of all the solar we've deployed. So, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night in Vermont in the summer, for our summer peak, is when we're seeing our peak. And, spring, fall, kind of lower. And then we kick it up in the winter with our peaks as well. And in the region peaks in the summer slightly earlier in the day than we do, but they're getting a lot of solar too, so they're starting to peak later as well. But essentially, the idea of storage shaving peaks is that it cuts off all of these highs and it fills in some of these lows and allows the system to be optimized or to be used at its fullest capacity. Just think of a highway that's been built to accommodate all the cars at rush hour. Well, imagine if you could sort of take a bunch of those cars during rush hour and move them an hour later, or 2 hours later. That's essentially the idea of storage saving peaks. Our utilities in Vermont pay a lot of money for their share of whatever that one peak is during the year. Right now it's in the summer for the whole region. And if they can shave that peak, you might hear Green Mountain Power saved $300,000 by deploying its battery storage fleet. That's what they're doing, is they're cutting off, some number, tens of megawatts, potentially more than that, during that 1 hour of the year. What happens is, other folks are paying some of that instead of us, but it benefits Vermont ratepayers. Next, please. Beat that one to death. So I wanted to just show you, comes from Felco, the statewide transmission operator, and it shows essentially what's happening with the solar penetration in Vermont. So 2015, sunny April day, sunny spring day, was a weekday. This was what our load statewide looked like, this orange. And then 2016, similar time of the year, this is what our load looked like in the middle of that sunny spring day. All of the solar from the sunny spring day is starting to push down the middle of our day, our whole electric load in the state. So you can see it's creeping down, 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 down. This is last year, 2018, sunny spring day in April. That's an overcast spring day in April. So that's the difference. This is the difference between clouds and sun. So that's what we're seeing. That is how much impact our solar fleet in Vermont, which is over 300 megawatts now, is making. So, the statewide system operator says, well, we've never seen anything like this before. How do we deal with this? How do we deal with this increasingly steep evening ramp? How do we deal with the unpredictability between an overcast and a sunny day? Storage is potentially one of the ways to take some of this in the middle of the day, some of the solar, store it up and use it here and shave off that ramp or shave off that steep evening peak. Next, please. Just another little note on solar. This is a solar penetration map that comes courtesy of ISO New England, the regional system operator. Shows the darker shades are where we have more solar deployed. And they get a list from all the utilities of where every single solar system is so they can map it out. Here is Green Mountain Power's solar map. So the more exciting the color there, or the darker the color, the more distribution system constraints Green Mountain Power is seeing. So if you go anywhere except green, you are either not going to be able to build your solar because it's not cost effective, or it's going to be a lot less cost effective than you thought it would be because you're going to have to pay for a lot of grid upgrades to be able to interconnect it. Because essentially, there's more solar than there is load, and the solar is being pushed out up to the substation level. So this sort of two-way flow of power is a new thing on the grid. So folks are thinking, okay, storage maybe can help with the times of day when solar is over-generating and allow more solar to be interconnected in those orange, and those potentially in the red areas as well. Next, please.
And could I ask real quick,
Sure.
going back to the other map? Is there a reason more solar is deployed in the darker areas of the ISO New England map?
Here?
Yeah.
I mean, it correlates with population pretty well. And you guys are,
There's more load?
you can kind of see like the highway corridors
Users.
and,
But that has something to do, where is the Green Mountain Power region? Because I know.
yeah. So Green Mountain Power is everything. So everything with color is Green Mountain Power.
Okay.
So this is, a lot of this is in Burlington, so it's in Burlington Electric. Some of the stuff up here is in Vermont Electric Cooperative. Over here, Washington Electric Cooperative. You can see Green Mountain Power sort of is plunked in amidst some of the Washington Electric Cooperative distribution infrastructure because they got the low-hanging fruit, main highways and byways. Washington Electric came in to help the rest.
Thank you.
Folks may have heard about something called the SHEI, which is the Sheffield Highgate Export Interface. So this is an area of northern Vermont that's export constrained for generation, which means there's a whole lot more generation up there than there is load. Average load up there is like 35 megawatts, and then there's like almost 500 megawatts of generation. So it's also a place where there's a lot of land that's potentially less expensive for locating a big solar project or a wind project, et cetera. So that's why we've seen a lot of generation up there. But essentially, no more generation can be added up in this area without basically jeopardizing or curtailing generation from existing projects. I've used the word cannibalizing, but it's a little extreme. So there is a study going on right now with the utilities and with Velco to figure out, is storage one part of a suite of solutions to address at least the existing curtailment right now that's going on. There's, you know, the set of solutions could be building more transmission, super expensive. You know, it could be some little distribution grid upgrades, but storage is in there. Yeah.
Yeah, what is the state's position on municipalities in terms of 90% by 50 utilizing storage? What is the position of the state in terms of any credits for that?
I guess I'm trying to connect the dots. So I don't know if we have a position for one thing, but
Well, let me just say that
Yeah.
in terms of Berrytown Planning Commission, that it was my understanding that in terms of our town trying to meet the goal,
Yeah.
that even though we have a couple of storage projects, and to me it's an idea of you can minimize, let's say, fossil fuel consumption if one can adequately have a storage system that picks up the peaks and we don't have to generate it. But I just wanted to understand in terms of all of us and our towns in the 90%, you know,
Yeah.
renewable by 2050.
Yeah.
Will the state allow us credits for storage projects? And I had heard that we would not be getting them.
I guess I just want to clarify what you mean by credits.
Because we have goals we need to try to achieve.
Yeah.
Each town has a goal.
I think that, so I will get a little bit more later to Act
Okay, so I
174
should
and how
hold
it
this for
fits
now?
with storage and utilities. Our philosophy again comes down to what's the least cost solution to meeting a goal. I don't know, there's some interesting kind of national dialogue and studies going on. This guy Carl Rabigo did a study on, you know, is it more cost effective to put out, if you were going for like 80, 90, 100% renewable goals, is it more cost effective to do a whole bunch of storage versus just build a whole lot more generation than you need and just be fine with it being curtailed? You know, you build to your kind of lowest amount of production, like low times of sun, you know, winter time, low wind periods. Build so that you have 100% production, or you meet your demand 100% during those times. And then when it's really sunny and you have a ton of wind, you're just shedding that. You're just shedding the excess production. And they found, I think it was up to maybe 85% renewable or something like that. It was more cost effective to just overgenerate. But with the costs of storage coming down, you know, there's going to be a tipping point, we think, at some point, where it will be cost effective to do storage up to some point. So that's some of the balance that you might want to be thinking about, you know, in your towns and region is someone's going to pay, you know, for the storage. Someone's going to pay for the generation. Is it the developer? Is it ratepayers? Is it the town somehow contributing
In the end,
to
we all
it?
pay.
Yeah, so we don't want anyone to pay more than they have to, I guess is what, you know, the point. But storage, I think most people think storage is absolutely a critical point, a part of reaching a high renewables, you know, or a low carbon future. So,
Can I just add to, I kind of understand what Byron's trying to say, and I can't really get it in my head straight, but if you can store more energy, aren't you then able to use more renewable energy because you've stored more of it? So that would be where you could use that towards how much renewable energy are you?
like use it close to home or,
Well,
yeah.
because you're storing, I guess I'm not, you know
Well,
what I mean?
that's another interesting
Because you're not shedding it, you actually can use more
Right.
of it. So you would be closer
Yeah.
to that goal.
Yeah, it just
If
goes
you
to
can
the
store
cost
enough of it,
effectiveness.
then obviously there'd be less generation required
Right.
to meet certain points. Because like you said, the whole system's built like for highway built for a traffic jam.
Right.
You know, just I found it interesting, and
Yeah.
I just wanted to try to get a better understanding, because I
Yeah.
couldn't quite get my head around the idea that if you can store a bunch of power,
Yeah.
and you can release it at certain defined times,
Yeah.
that there could be less power, consumed in carbon, carbon producing.
And this will change too, as we get longer duration storage, like seasonal storage. Like right now, if you're gonna rely on solar plus storage, and you wanna be 100% renewable in the wintertime, when we're not getting a lot of solar generation, a lot of panels are covered in snow, for instance, you may not be able to be 100% renewable until we get sort of longer duration storage where you can, seasonal storage, you can take some of that solar from the summer and fall and shift it into the winter. We're not there, we're not there yet. But
Yeah.
right now we've got like 4 hours. The cost-effective batteries are 4 hours. So you can shift from the middle of the day to later at night. But to shift sort of over weeks, extended cold snaps in the winter when the region turns on all its dirty fossil generation to meet the regional peaks because everyone's, cranking up every heating device they have, that's a kind of, we have to think to that worst case scenario.
But over time, then, towards meeting that goal, the state would be supportive, would want more storage, because as we
Yeah, we
part
want
of the renewable.
cost-effective storage, I think is safe to say. Yeah.
Yeah, I have I understand that Green Mountain Power is supporting, like individual homeowners or people storing, that whole program is basically so that they can tap into that stored power. Is there anything that the state, and I am not part of Green Mountain Power and have been very envious of that program. I personally looked into a storage battery just for my personal use when the power is out, but learned more about this storage, being able to tap into it. Is there any thought on the state level to help support smaller electric utilities to be able to offer the same thing to
Yep.
people?
Well, you should be optimistic because they are all thinking about it. A lot of
Who is
all the utilities are
Okay,
thinking about
right.
storage in
Even
Vermont.
Hardwick?
Even
That's what I was wondering.
well, even VIPS, Vermont Public Power Supply Authority, which they basically help all of the municipal electric utilities and do their power supply, their planning, etc. VIPSA as an entity is looking into storage, something like a Tesla Powerwall deal. There's a couple challenges. Scale is a big challenge. Green Mountain Power is able to go
Right.
to a supplier like Tesla, a vendor like Tesla, and say, put us down for, 10,000 units. It's a smaller utility can't exactly attract kind of that much interest, especially when there's
But could the state do that?
well, I was going to say when there's a lot of demand on one particular manufacturer. The thing that Green Mountain Power, a lot of utilities look toward Green Mountain Power to do something innovative like the Tesla Powerwall pilot, to work out the kinks and then to try to do it. So there are, I don't know about Washington Electric Cooperative, but I believe Vermont Electric Cooperative is actively in discussions with several vendors. The thing about the Tesla is that they have a control management platform.
Right. They also have a monopoly kind of on the batteries that are available.
Well, there's, they're a juggernaut, right?
Right.
But there's so Green Mountain Power, it's like getting ahead of myself, but
Sorry.
Green Mountain Power has a program called Bring Your Own Device as well, where you can bring in four or five different battery vendors that will meet certain specs to be able to plug into another control management platform that Green Mountain Power has called Virtual Peaker. And, it's like the sun battery. There's a few different batteries that can be used. So there's kind of an arms race right now are these vendors, these battery vendors, these companies going to be developing their own proprietary control management platform and selling this whole bundle, with subscriptions and manual fees and all that? Or is there going to be some sort of open source, type of platform that can be used with any type of battery vendor? And there's promise for that in that Virtual Peaker. And Green Mountain Power and the other utilities are all discussing all the time whether they can maybe be part of that. But the other utility, like a cooperative utility or municipal utility, they're proceeding with more caution. And I don't think, I mean, I think the customer's asking for it. I think, we'll hasten that type of decision, but it's, it's prudent on their part, and I think that there will be new opportunities rolling out for customers of other utilities probably pretty soon. Pay attention to their integrated resource plans when those are, I know, it's very exciting reading. Yeah.
If you read your the introduction of your report, it says, in preparing the report, the department reached out to many stakeholders, including electric transmission and distribution utilities, renewable energy and storage project developers, nonprofit land use planners, neighboring states, and the regional transmission organization. Well, what's missing from this equation is municipalities, municipal government. And it would have been nice had you asked what's going on with us in this discussion. Because when you talk to the Green Mountain Powers, the large utilities, you get exactly the excuses of not being able to have Washington Electric provide the storage. It's the regulator's responsibility to step up to that. And as far as I can see, I must say, I'm just not very impressed.
I will say we did reach out to Vermont League of Cities and Towns and asked them to participate. It's several years back, so I can't remember if they filed comments or not. We also reached out through VAPTA to all the regional planning commissions to ask them to participate. And I believe we do have comments from them. And we reached out to everyone who's ever sent anything to the Public Utility Commission, for all of their stakeholder lists. Mm-hmm. So we bent over backwards on the outreach.
Well, I was in municipal government for many years and I didn't hear anything, so I'm just telling you.
Well, I guess one thing I would recommend is maybe touching base with Karen Horn at Vermont League of Cities and Towns.
I think I will directly address the problem with the people. Thank you, for your input on that.
Okay.
I'll really.
Thank you. There is another opportunity to be involved if I can get to that slide, where if you would like me to put you directly on a stakeholder list, I'd be happy to do that.
Yes.
Okay? All right, next. Okay, so just going a little bit more into peaks. One of the things we think about as we are electrifying heating and transportation is what that's going to do to the peakiness of our system. So this comes from a California Energy Commission report, which talks about EV charging profiles. Depending on if they're controlled or uncontrolled, you could see a real exacerbation of those evening peaks as people are coming home from work and plugging into their homes. And a lot of this goes to do we want to incentivize people to, charge in the middle of the day, charge at their workplaces, workplace charging, charging while shopping. But there is the potential, if we don't kind of get ahead of that a lot of sort of uncontrolled EV charging right at those evening hours, exacerbating peak, may happen. And this comes from EPRI, Electric Power Research Institute, which shows, basically this was the 2015 winter peak. This is the status now, down here. And this is the 2015 summer peak. If you add in all of the load coming from electric vehicles and coming from heat pumps, and it's uncontrolled, by 2050 you're looking at really high winter peaks. And winter peaks are the times when our system is most stressed in the region, and again, I mentioned we turn on all that dirty generation. So again, this is another need to use something like storage, but there's other solutions that may be lesser cost to levelize all of these peaks and make the most efficient use of our poles and wires. Next, please. Okay, so a lot of people think about storage in terms of resilience, backup power. I don't have to use my dirty fossil generator. Maybe I don't have any backup power. I don't have any backup power right now, and I'm in Washington Electric territory. We've had a few multi-day power outages, and it's a good opportunity to clean out the fridge, but not everybody wants to be subject to that. So, these are just a few news stories. Again, think about that duration of storage, that seasonality of storage. What power are you storing if you're thinking about fossil fuel impacts? And do we really want to be deploying storage to address all of these resilience situations? So you have accidents running into utility poles, a lot of impacts from wildlife, like squirrels. You've got ice storms, you've got high winds, and then you've got, the very rare occasions, but they do happen, of extended multi-day blackout situations over the whole region. So next, please. One of the things you want to think about in terms of resilience is the scale of it. Are you trying to just support your home? Do you have solar PV or another generation source on your home to keep feeding into that storage, to keep supporting the loads in your house? Do you want to think about community storage, a little bit upstream of several houses? Do we want to think about storage, larger scale microgrid, right, at the level, sort of the substation level, or the distribution feeder level? All of these imply different scales and durations of storage, and may not be able to support all of the houses on that circuit. Next. Okay, so when you want to deploy storage, you want to think about maximizing all of these things if they're complementary. So the peak management, really it's the utilities right now that are able to capture that value stream. Integration of renewables. We don't yet know how to value that. That's sort of a rate design question, but it is a value that storage can provide. And grid resiliency and microgrid. Again, we don't really know how to value it. That value kind of comes innately from a customer who wants to keep their power on. But ideally, you'll be able to maximize as many values as possible and hit the middle of that Venn diagram. But right now, this is what's paying for storage. Next. Again, storage is getting less and less expensive, at least lithium-ion batteries. These are the cost declines for a 4-hour lithium-ion battery pack. So it is becoming more easily cost-effective. Next. So we talked about the Swiss Army knife, right? So the whole Swiss Army knife is probably more valuable than the sum of all its parts. If you can deploy one battery storage system and you can get the algorithms right and you can maximize a lot of value streams that people are willing to pay for, great. Next. But maybe sometimes some of all of this stacking of value is just not as good as the original big simple tool to do something like reduce peak or provide resilience or integrate renewables. Next. So thinking about something like resilience in all those situations, squirrel knocking out power, this is a big issue right now. Emerald ash borer, it's a huge issue for our distribution utilities. They're looking at massive investments in trying to maintain rights of way and proactively, preemptively take down ash trees, which may or may not be in the rights of way. So that is a big investment that will flow through to ratepayers. If you consider an ash tree potentially falling on your utility distribution lines, is storage the best way to address that, or maybe it is actually just doing more vegetation management, tree clearing, etc. To manage peaks, we already have tools to manage peaks. We've got energy efficiency. You can target that energy efficiency to certain hours of the day. We have demand response where you can contact a customer, a big user, and say, can you just reduce your use during these certain hours? They get paid something for that. And then rate design. If we tell people, if we don't have time of use rates right now, or it's not the standard offering, but if everyone was on a time of use rate where you had to pay more when energy was more expensive for the utility to buy, then a lot of us might be able to, especially with storage though, shift our usage to another time. Again, integration of renewables. Do we want to just let renewables operate whenever they want and have storage buffer all of that? Or do we want to say, hey, your solar production is actually not valuable or not as valuable until 6 p.m. Like, we'll give you full value for your production in the evening, and then we're not going to give you any value during the day. That's another sort of implied flow-through value to storage, right? They're doing this in Hawaii. They've basically said, if you export during certain hours of the day, no money for you. So there's a lot of storage activity happening in Hawaii, so people can get the full value for whatever they export, or they put storage in their homes and basically self-supply between the solar and the storage and sort of partially disconnect from the grid. And then resilience, vegetation management, moving our utility poles out of the woods and onto the roadsides. Having system protections, there's some new kind of things you can deploy to keep squirrels off, I guess. New technologies around grid sensing and self-healing, so the grid can sort of sectionalize or redirect flow to sort of work around a disturbance. And then forecasting, getting your crews together, looking at the weather. Weather forecasting has increased, sensitivity has increased a lot in the last decade, so you know what the storm impact might be. You can pre-position crews to be able to get the power back on more quickly. You know, so maybe you want to max out these, or maybe you want to consider these as you're considering storage. Next. This is just a little diagram of how you can stack some of the values as a developer of storage. You need to be able to, you know, make sure that your values that you're getting for your storage outweigh the costs of that storage plant. Next. I wanted to put in a few slides again as you're thinking about your Act 174 or your energy planning outside of Act 174. I mentioned that resilience is hard to value. Resilience is in the eye of the beholder. You know, what are you willing to pay to have your power stay on or support, you know, your fridge and your freezer and your water pump, your internet, whatever, you know, that's sort of up to the individual customer. Or if there's a business or a manufacturer, what are they willing to pay to sort of not have either short or longer interruptions to their power? So this is just, I did a different presentation on microgrids at a different venue, and I just did a little research and threw this in. You don't have to read it all now, but here's some good resources out there for you to sort of play around with, and calculators to figure out how you might want to value resilience, or if you do value resilience, how that can actually make a storage project pencil out. If you're really interested in attracting a third party or building your own storage project and you're almost there with that value stack, you know, someone's able to shave peaks, you might say, hey, we're willing to pay this extra amount for resilience value. So that make the storage project go. Next. Nah, not going to bore you with this. I think I've talked about that. Next. So here's what some of the utilities are doing with storage right now. Talked about, you know, some of the larger utility scale projects, some of the, you know, aggregated home projects like the Teslas. There's a list right here. You can look at your leisure if Bonnie sends this around. Next. And then there's a bunch of non-utilities embarking on storage activities. So the bring your own device. So there's folks like SunCommon, other sort of developers of solar or other renewable technologies. Because Green Mountain Power has this bring your own device option, now there's a value stream that developer can come into a customer and say, would you like to have storage with your solar? And by the way, you don't have to pay the full amount for the storage as you would have before, because Green Mountain Power is going to pay you this little bit, you know, for that value that they're getting from aggregating your storage with the other units. Northern Power Systems, which is now WEG Technologies, they have a certificate of public good to build a 5 megawatt battery in the Wilson Industrial Park in Barrie. And I don't think it's been built yet, but they have that certificate of public good now, so they can build that project. And that's a 5 megawatt battery. That would be the biggest battery we've seen in Vermont so far.
Out of curiosity, what's the ratio of cost between, for instance, a group of solar panels and then the batteries that would back up 100 megawatts, let's say, or whatever? What's the ratio of that? Because I mean, I know what I spent personally on battery versus the solar on the roof.
Yeah. Well, you mean full cost without, because basically like Green Mountain Power will give you an upfront chunk of money.
Nobody here is on Green Mountain Power.
Yeah, so you're maybe paying $10,000 to $14,000 for a whole house backup battery system. But that's like the power goes out and you've got all your things on and you don't want to turn anything, you know, you don't have a separate panel.
Right, but I think I'm asking more
lower.
generally speaking on these programs.
Yeah.
What's the ratio of the actual cost of the solar or wind or whatever to the battery backup?
Yeah, I would say at this point it's probably
Equal?
like
50 to 1?
It depends on the size of your solar too. Like all else being equal, a similar size system, so a 5 kilowatt Tesla Powerwall is going to be something like $7,000, and your 5 kilowatt solar system is going to be probably twice that, 3 times that. So but they're doing different things, so it's hard to say that they're totally equal. Like,
well, I think
I'm uncomfortable comparing them with each other.
All right, well, but a municipality has to at least look at the total cost of everything.
Right.
And so, I mean, I'm just kind of trying to get a gauge.
I mean, if you're a municipality and you're trying to support a neighborhood or an emergency shelter, you're not looking at a 5 kilowatt battery, you're looking at, you know, a megawatt or more, probably, size battery. And then if you want to support it for, yeah, there's a lot of pieces to that equation, but I'd be happy to like work through particular situations with you if you want. Next. So I pulled together this little chart showing basically by 2020 the storage that I think is going to be deployed in Vermont based on what's already been given a certificate of public good, what's in the queue for a certificate of public good, and then the smaller, what GMP's plans are for their power walls. So that's 32.5 megawatts, and if I assume it's all 4 hours, you get 130 megawatt hours. So Vermont, Massachusetts' goal is 200 megawatt hours, or at least that was their goal until I think it may have just changed to 1,000 megawatt hours. So in either case, we're kind of, you know, we're doing pretty well in the context of the region and how much storage we're deploying, even in the absence of a storage target. Next. I mentioned Green Mountain Power's Integrated Resource Plan. Folks, I don't think anyone here is in Vermont Electric Cooperative Territory. They talk a lot about storage in their Integrated Resource Plan, and Washington Electric Cooperative should be coming in later this year with their Integrated Resource Plan. But they're all talking about storage. Green Mountain Power has gone so far to say between storage and flexible loads, we think maybe 50 to 100 megawatts of storage is what it's going to be cost effective to deploy, because as you start flattening out those peaks, which are, that's the major value stream from storage, you have to deploy more and longer to get longer and longer peak shaving. So once you kind of flatten out your demand, you're not getting a lot of incremental value from every storage unit that you add. So they've asked, until new markets emerge, like a ramping market in the region, for instance, they think 50 to 100 megawatts. And, you know, most of that storage you saw, that 32.5, is in Green Mountain Power territory. Next. Okay, so opportunities for communities. Green Mountain Power had 3 2-megawatt storage, 5 megawatt solar projects that they got certificates of public good for this last year, and as part of the settlement around those projects, they are required to undertake a system-wide analysis of the best areas to deploy storage to not only shave peaks, because to shave peaks, the storage can be anywhere in their service territory, but also to integrate renewables and other distributed energy resources, and for that reliability and resilience benefit. So I believe they're doing that right now. I have yet to see any work product from it. Also, when they're proposing a specific storage project, they have to identify any expected values, including the potential for a third party, remember, maybe the municipality who wants to value resilience, to contribute to the cost and benefit sharing of that project. So for whatever parts of the Central Vermont region are in Green Mountain Power's territory, I would encourage you to be reaching out proactively to Green Mountain Power, probably Josh Castingay, and say, hey, we're really interested in this study that you're doing, and we want to know how we can work with you because we're doing our energy plan, or our region is, or our town is, and we would like to figure out, we have already identified in our regional plan where our emergency shelters are, or where we want to support resilience, or where, where it makes a big, where the schools are, where our critical facilities are, where our emergency first responders are, where our pumping stations are, all of that. Those are the types of things you might want to consider for a storage project. And then also in the energy planning, when you're identifying preferred locations for siting a generator or a specific size or type of generator, to kind of dovetail that effort with your emergency planning efforts and say, hey, we might want to consider, the areas around our critical facilities as potentially preferred for solar plus storage, etc., as long as it would end up sort of islanding our critical facility, our emergency shelter, etc. So those are all ways that I was kind of brainstorming that you could be working with towns, or your individual towns could be thinking about and sort of directing the development of storage. Next. Again, this is a calculator that's out there for you to figure out how to value resilience. And next. The last thing I wanted to say, and this is what I was mentioning, Graham, in terms of another opportunity to interact around storage. Typo there, sorry. Act 31, which just passed this year, requires storage if it's 500 kilowatts or larger to get a certificate of public good, just like a solar project would. And it requires us to report to the legislature by January on how to regulate, if at all, storage under 500 kilowatts. Sorry about all the varying of that text there. Or storage facilities that are not subject to the utilities' direct or indirect control. So one of the emerging ideas is that a third party could come in, aggregate a bunch of storage, like all the power walls, and basically sell those services directly to the region and be charging up all those batteries or discharging them at times where it's not helpful to the distribution grid or actually causes adverse impacts to the utilities' operations. So we're trying to think about how do we kind of coordinate those operations and not cause adverse impacts to ratepayers from third parties operating fleets of storage resources.
What was the kilowatt hours for requiring the storage?
It's 500 kilowatts
500?
or larger. You have to get a CPG. And all the storage projects of any size have been coming in for a CPG, but voluntarily. It hasn't been clear in law. So, we have to figure out, there's a bunch of rulemakings going on. The interconnection rule is up for review right now. The net metering rule is up for review right now. These are all areas where we can be thinking about, like, how should storage be regulated? Aside and apart from, but complementary to this effort. Yeah.
The adverse weather events, the consensus opinion from a variety of meteorologists is that 1 inch or greater rain events will be exponentially increasing. In my town, we've seen power outages increase due to wind and rain. I would just suggest that the state consider, especially towns like mine are not completely serviced by Green Mountain Power, that the state incentivize utilities to really focus on the smaller municipalities and what they can do in order to secure storage. Because you're going to see an exponential increase of power outages, and the way that affects a smaller town, I really, I already had one homeowner because of they're being serviced by Washington Electric, just his house on the market, so because of power problems. So just pass that on to whoever.
Okay, thank you. And I don't know if for Washington Electric Cooperative, this discussion may already be happening in-house. Go ahead.
This whole thing with, is really, what I'm hearing is this is geared towards larger entities and stuff, not towards the homeowner. You're talking about, you could change net metering, it's going to be changed and everything. I have my solar system in now, I generate more every month than I use. But I still pay tax on consumption, which is fine. It goes on my bill, there's a tax for consumption. Also on my bill is a charge that Washington Electric goes to me for the maintenance of the lines and stuff. Washington Electric now, I'm sure you are aware, they are redoing how they're going to do it. And it's going to be now almost double what I'm paying now.
I know this because I am too.
Okay.
Customer.
So I've never paid more than $17 a month.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to pay a minimum of about $32. So my point I'm trying to make is I'm ready to go out and disconnect. And if your whole plan is to get storage, you have to make it viable for the people to put the storage in, and yet Washington Electric is fighting that, okay? They're going to make it so the best thing that the individual can do is disconnect.
Well, that is a potential future, at those cost declines of storage, if it comes down enough, I mean, there could be people who just say, I'm just gonna go off grid. That's what makes sense, but then that leaves the Washington Electric with increasingly smaller customer base to pay for all those
Well, that's
already made investments in poles and wires, so it's,
That's what I mean.
it's an individual versus socialized
Yeah,
thing.
you gotta think of that when you're designing this storage system, that if you're gonna put that on the back of the homeowner, you're gonna drive the homeowner out of the, hooking up to the system. It's not gonna be, it won't be feasible anymore.
No, I hear you. And just, Steve, do you have something to?
Well, I'm also a Washington Electric solar customer. But I'm also a board member at Washington Electric, and so I'm quite aware as to how much every solar installation costs the ratepayer. And the reason for changing the rates, though, is not ostensibly because of the overvaluing of solar. It's to reduce the hourly energy cost of electricity so as to help to motivate people to do more switching to reducing fossil fuels. Because obviously if you have more solar coming on, the rates go up, people are not going to buy electric vehicles, people aren't going to buy heat pumps, they're not going to do any of the more cost-effective, pervasive aspects of addressing the comprehensive energy plan if electric rates are going up for various reasons, one of which is unfortunately the fact that solar is costing utilities and the ratepayers more than its true value is. And for Washington Electric, it's an issue because it's already 100% renewable utility. So solar, whereas as far as I can tell, the utility supports the solar, it follows the law in doing so. But because this utility, as others, is are 100% renewable, it is adding an additional social aspect.
So you're telling me to disconnect? Thank you.
Well, I hope you do, in the sense, not because I'm bitter, I would like to see people trying it. I think it's great that you want to try it. And then maybe that's the way of the future.
You know, and this is a big discussion with all the utilities right now, and the net metering program has gone through a lot of different permutations, and the rates actually just stepped down again. You know, if there's a lot of sort of, rhetoric around net metering is too expensive, and that's a rate design question right there. Like if net metering, if what utilities pay to customers for their net metering generation is equal to the value of that generation, which may be because it's shifted into the evening with storage, then it's cost neutral to the utility and the other ratepayers. But it's really an individual question for each utility, and also a question of the risk in terms of entering into something like a fleet battery storage aggregation, pay you some money for that as well.
Well, I'll say one more thing now set up. 5 years ago, you were encouraging people to do this. I don't say you, but you. Washington Electric and everybody encouraging people to put it in. So I spent my money to put this in, okay? And now you're saying somebody made a mistake and didn't calculate right, and it's costing more for me to have this in. It's costing the utility more.
Well, the value is diminished of solar as you see that penetration.
And I'm saying, don't make the mistake again. You made it one time, don't make the mistake again.
I won't say it was a mistake, because the value was actually higher then when you put the system in, but it's gone down as we've gotten higher solar penetration.
Well, you made a mistake because you didn't look at what the outcome of this was going to be. And I'm not saying you, but there was a mistake made because you didn't anticipate what the outcome was going to be and what that would affect. And if you're looking now at putting in storage and homes and everything else, try to think what the outcome of that's going to be 5-10 years from now, so people don't invest in something that's going to cost everybody more money.
Yeah, and you'll see we had there, so like Massachusetts has just revamped their solar net metering program, to just give you more money if you do storage as well. You just get an adder. Doesn't matter when you're, how you use that storage, you just go get an adder. We don't think that's actually a really very good idea.
I think it's a great idea.
We might end up where you don't want us to be in 5 years. So, you know, anytime you put money in legislation, like this amount of rate for 30 years, is not a good idea. Yes.
Yeah, and two things. I'm very appreciative of your talk. I found out, I wasn't sure what I was going to be, and I had all sorts of comments I was going to make, but this has been fantastic. I think you people are not running off the deep end on this. No, you listen to the news and you listen to other groups, and everybody, oh, this is what we got to do. And at least I'm glad Vermont is not running off the deep end with this. As Lee says, you can't, because then when you run off the deep end, then you get into trouble without thinking ahead. Secondly, I have solar and I have a power wall. I'm renting it from Tesla. I feel it's cheaper, and then I don't have to worry about other stuff like they put it in and I don't have to pay for it and that sort of stuff. So I have and I've been since, well, I've had it a while, but since spring, if anyone's interested, I have a record of how much my stuff is generating every day, because I can read that off, and realizing that in the summertime it's great. I'm doing well because I'm not using much at home. I don't have it, and again, in the winter, what worries me, and I'm going to see what happens when you have a week where you barely have any sun, and everyone, you have a storage problem. We're not talking about 4 hours. We're talking about 4 days. And this has bothered me. What are you going to do for storage? Your storage stuff is time limited. But I'm glad I have mine. If anyone's interested in my daily, the last few months is when of how much I've generated and how much I've used. Now in the summertime I've generated more than I've been using, partly because it's sunny and partly because we're not here. But in the wintertime, when my power bill has been a couple of winter months where my generation has been, instead in the summertime it's 300 or 400 kilowatt hours. A couple of times in the winter it's been like 15 because of the snow.
Yeah.
So this is something that obviously I'm glad you realize this. So I think it's a great idea. I think the renewables and that, but please, I'm begging, don't, and that's why I think yours is great. Don't get other people saying this is going to solve everything, and it's simple. It's not, as Lee points out, this is not simple. You have the renewables, you got mesh into the grid, your northeast area. It's a transmission problem. In fact, there's an article in Scientific American, I can give you a copy of, about making renewables work, and it's going to involve long-distance, high-voltage DC transmissions. And I hate to say it, I don't see that happening, not for technical reasons, but read the newspaper.
Right. It's hard
So
to say
it's not,
transmission.
yeah. But I think you were, as I said, very pleased. I came with all sorts of not fine questions, but I don't need to ask them because you're doing a good job. And I think you have to let the people know, the public know. I did not know Vermont was, I have originally mentioned this to Bonnie about storage. The storage has to go someplace. Everyone wants storage. Oh, it's great. Until someone puts a 5 megawatt battery, lithium-ion battery in their backyard.
Right,
Yeah.
and you can't even talk about decommissioning.
And never mind a windmill. Now they got this, right away. What are you going to do? You need space for the storage. And I think my original question to Bonnie, we should be, where is this stuff, some of this stuff's going to be? It takes space. And there is a lithium-ion, liquid sodium. This stuff can have a potential to be a problem. And a whole other thing is how much foreign resources we're using up making this stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we are trying to be cognizant with each of these certificates of public good. There's the, you know, the
Yeah.
siting stuff, but also the decommissioning piece.
And
As well.
most of most of the lithium, and that's Tesla's problem. They can't, lithium salts are coming from China. And they're coming from South America, probably environmentally destroying wetlands.
Yeah,
This should be
Hopefully
thought
we'll
about.
get some of those new battery chemistries coming along that are less toxic. I think
Maybe.
we're all interested in
At
that.
least to start with.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, just one more thing. In the report, it says the department does not support the companion recommendation, this is from stakeholders, to allow aggregation across utility service territories. And there is already a mechanism available to aggregate resources, including storage across service territories, and bid into various ISO NE markets, which would not burden Vermont distribution utilities with the administrative cost of accounting for share of load reduction. I was wondering if you could just explain that a little bit, because once again, my concern, I think it's great that you're working hard in terms of renewables. I think that that's wonderful, but I'm interested in the small player, and it would seem that the aggregation of services would help people who live in Washington County, you know, in smaller places.
And I think there could be aggregations in terms of, you know, using that, a product like the virtual peaker to do the dispatch, you know, tell all that storage when to charge and discharge. And in terms of purchasing, like bulk purchasing of products, like everyone could maybe use that control algorithm and there could be a bulk purchase. But the issue was around an individual, like a third party, not the utility itself, basically pulling on a fleet of batteries that the third party has deployed in Green Mountain Power Territory, Washington Electric Service Territory, Vermont Electric Service Territory, and then somehow there having to be another settlement process beyond what's already happening in the Velco realm and at the ISO New England realm that is just a sort of big sort of regulatory headache.
No,
That was the
see,
issue.
No, that's exactly my point.
Yeah.
You're illustrating my point. It is a headache for the utilities.
Yeah.
But the on-the-ground benefit
Yeah.
for the smaller community
Yeah.
is so strong. You know, in other words, if you
Yeah.
could give the GMP service to people, you know, like
Yeah.
my friend over there who invested all this money, it
Yeah.
would solve his problem. I understand. See, I'm not as concerned about burdening the utility as the regulator seems to be, and that's my concern.
Well, I think it's the utilities that have the concern. I mean, you have a large utility like Green Mountain has a ton of resources maybe to do that kind of settlement work, but then you have, I mean, I don't know what Washington Electric Cooperative would think of, you know, maybe hiring another staff person, or, you know, it could be expensive for the ratepayers of the utility
But,
itself.
well, no, but there might be, if you had a clever regulatory scheme, maybe Green Mountain Power would foot the bill for that. And because of in terms of the general good of the situation, that's all. And nobody seems to be taking that into consideration. You know, in other words, oh, it's gonna cost Washington Electric too much to do it. Well, then find out, maybe the rich players can subsidize that activity.
Maybe, I don't know.
The aggregation thing, I'm just gonna talk about my town, Calais. We use 3 electric companies. Now, you wanna talk about anything that's common in Calais to have to deal with 3 electric companies. Aggregation help us come together to get a good microgrid of solar, storage, and whatever that serves my town.
Yeah. Who do you have? You have Green Mountain Power, Washington Electric, and
Hardwick.
And Hardwick. Yeah. That's tricky.
Right. It's very tricky.
I feel your pain.
So if we could move things along just a little bit, I think we're a little bit behind. We are going to table one of the items on here, so we have some extra time, so no one panic. But a few more minutes maybe, because obviously everyone's interested.
Yeah, are there more questions?
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about the, excuse me, about the decommissioning and kind of the lifespan of these systems for those of us that haven't read up on it?
Right, yeah, I mean, lithium ion, so there's different kind of levels of decommissioning. There's the manufacturer's sort of they'll take back your battery system at the end of its useful life type of decommissioning, and my understanding is that Tesla does have, or plans to have, a recycling facility. I mean, they're already looking at taking back used electric vehicle batteries and using those, stacking those together and using those as like a virtual power plant, or as a single large utility scale battery made up of a bunch of little used EV batteries on the grid. So there's a certain amount of sort of whatever upcycling that can happen. And then there's the recycling, breaking down into the components. So that my understanding is that Tesla does offer that program, and it's a requirement in all of the utility 248 CPGs to decommission. That's just a requirement that feeds through into the utility certificates of public good, whether it's solar, wind, storage, whatever. There has to be a decommissioning. There's a decommissioning requirement. And then if it's a third party, there would have to be proactively added in a decommissioning requirement. And the thought is potentially, I think what we recommended was mirroring the decommissioning requirements that are for solar. So, if it's above a certain size, that if you're a merchant developer, third-party developer, you have to put a fund together, a letter of credit, an evergreen letter of credit, that there's this chunk of money at the end of the project's useful life that can be used, even if that original developer is well out of the question. It stays with the project to be used to decommission. And then if it's a smaller size storage project, it would just be something like a condition or requirement. You wouldn't have to have that pot of money. So that's going to be part of the discussion this summer, around the summer and fall, around regulatory requirements for smaller storage. Right now, with the utility deploying it, it's all in pilot. Everything that Green Mountain Power is doing, you may be surprised to learn, is in the pilot stage. It's all pilots. So as soon, once there's a tariffed offering, that's when we can look into things like, how is this going to be, how are all of these units going to be sort of decommissioned in the aggregate? But you're looking at a 10-year lifespan, possibly longer, before you have to start there's degradation. You have to either deal with the fact that you're not getting as many cycles, or you're not cycling as deeply, or you don't have as much depth of discharge, or you start replacing some of the cells. Some of the bigger utility scale projects actually just have built in their contracts with the supplier that there's going to be a swapping out of the cells, or the individual units within the larger battery after 10 years or over time, so that it has a 20, 25, 30-year lifespan to be commensurate with the solar. So it's basically like some of the manufacturers, like Tesla, for the power packs, the utility scale batteries, are offering, basically like a depth of discharge, or it's like a production guarantee that they'll come in when the system starts to degrade and just swap those out. Any other questions? All right.
Thank you very much. That was
Appreciate it.
We are moving on to municipal plan determination of energy compliance for the town of Waterbury. And I think Bill Arand is going to help us with this discussion. So Bill is chair of the Town Plan Review Committee, and he'll tell us what the committee has been deciding.
Which is okay. Yeah.
Okay, so at the last commission meeting, we approved the Waterbury Town Plan, and they're planning thing. They're planning. Yeah. However, they had to have another warned meeting, a public hearing, to have us approve the renewable energy part of their plan. And so we didn't have a couple dozen people at that meeting. We had Steve.
He's
Yeah, and Stu Clark, and John, is it, Brabant?
John Brabant.
Three people, and still had a good lively discussion. And essentially, we are recommending that the commission approve the energy section. We decided that it fulfilled all of the requirements. But we did want to point out that, I can't find it right now, but it had to do with a couple of things that probably should be made a little clearer, at least in the next plan or something, which was, for instance, the Schutzville Hill corridor, which is certainly an area where there should be no development. It wasn't, to some people it wasn't clear whether it was a known constraint, a local or a regional known constraint, exactly how the maps worked, how the wording was. And the other issue was that this, as Claire pointed out, I think was the first time actually that we've done this whole process for these new energy sections. And there was a lot of give and take. There were a lot of things that came up, I think, that more complex and more far-reaching than we're used to seeing when we look at a town plan. And so we just want to kind of put that out as a warning as people, as communities put together this plan, that they want to do a lot of outreach and make sure they're covering every aspect of it as closely as they can. So given that, unless Steve or Claire or anybody else on that committee would like to have something to say about that, we can.
No, I think we covered everything there.
We can go ahead and.
Well, I think it was more like the consistency of what it says in one where, and then what the maps say, and what we were coming. You know, it has to come together. And what was actually mentioned was that the Schutzville area, in our regional plan, we don't. How did that go, Claire? We don't have it well defined as a constraint. And yet, other maps from the Vermont Land Trust or a couple other places do state that it's very sensitive area. So maybe it was, I think, a recommendation that as a regional plan, we re-look at that area in terms of making it a better constraint.
Maybe I could just add on the wildlife issue, and I think this is one that will get more and more traction excuse me, as we move forward. The issue really revolved around what are areas of critical wildlife habitat. And the map that we have that's part of our forest integrity map uses the state's biofinder data, and part of that is areas that are highest priority connectivity blocks, and that is a possible constraint in the list that the state provides. That's my understanding. It's not a known constraint where you would actually take out an area that might have wind potential. So I think more work needs to be done. Our Conservation Commission is working closely with our Planning Commission to work on this issue of the Schutzville Wildlife Corridor. But I do think it is a broader issue that we as a commission will continue to deal with as we assess other energy plans moving forward. It was a good learning experience for me.
Good. Yeah, I'm just wondering, is there a rush to pass it? I mean, if there was a hearing and people voiced concerns and, you know, and they're not going to be included this round, is it because we're in a hurry to pass it? Or could you wait and make these revisions?
Yeah, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bonnie or Laura, is that our local energy plan is part of our municipal plan. And as a commission, we actually have 60 days from submission to approve or deny the municipal plan. So for better or for worse, it's tied in with our municipal plan. It's part of it. And of course, we're interested in getting substantial deference before the Public Utility Commission. So I don't think we can kind of disengage the energy plan I suppose we could not get, Waterbury could not get the commission's approval for the substantial deference, but in reality, it's all tied in together with the municipal plan, as it should be. So our position as a municipality is no, it's part of the municipal plan, and we would want to get it approved in conjunction. The only glitch happened to be with, as I understand it, with this, that the warning for the hearing didn't end up on the website. That's why we're back here today.
Yeah, the energy element is a part of every town's plan, because we've got to mirror the regional plan. It's that some of the towns, my understanding, would pick, there's 3 towns picked, and I think you were one, and you had an enhanced energy plan, right?
Right.
And so your town plan was approved back in December of 18, and now you've got your enhanced energy piece that I'm sure is referenced in your energy element portion. And now that's, the Public Utility Commission they don't just look at the energy element of the town's plan, they want to look at the town plan in terms of siting issues, exactly what we're talking, exactly these things. So this whole issue is really because it's a beginning of trying to get enhanced energy plans towards that 90% by 50. And so that's what's going on, and these issues come up. In Berrytown, we've got an issue in terms of our bear breeding areas are in the areas, the northeast part and southwest part of the town where they've got the best energy potential for wind and solar. So now here we've got a constraint, and how do we deal with this? And I'm sure this is something that just about all the towns, there's going to be a lot of commonality, I'm sure, in that type of issue. So there's no rush to put anything through. It's a mechanics of a program that's being started and is being implemented, and Waterbury's the first town that's come up for consideration. And it's important, and it's the overall town plan, so it's part of it.
Yes, I voted against it last time. I think I was the only one because of that issue of, I've done that myself, show up to the public hearing, give your input, and it's completely ignored and ramrodded. And I think especially if it's something this sensitive, we should really be doing it right the first time. What's the point of ramrodding it? I guess I don't understand why we couldn't just pause and go back to the drawing board, get it right.
Bonnie, do you want to talk?
Are you asking whether the regional commission should do that or whether the local?
The local, yeah. That's why I voted against it last time, and I plan to again. For that reason, I just feel like, if the public process didn't respond to the public input, then it wasn't valid.
Well, I don't think, maybe I could just respond, Bram, before you comment, but no, I don't think that Waterbury has any intention of ramrodding anything. Yeah. We're very aware of this issue, and I think it's a strength that we have a local energy plan and we have a municipal plan, because if a project, let's say, were to come up in the Schutzville Wildlife Corridor, we can point to the municipal plan, and if we have substantial deference, we can say, look, the municipal plan says that this is a very important area. We don't think, a wind tower or a solar field should be in this particular location. We did it with a telecommunications tower before the Public Utility Commission, and we won the case. Very similar wildlife issues. So I think just because it's not identified as a known constraint doesn't mean it isn't an important issue. So, and I realize the mapping is confusing for people because it does show areas for potential wind, but if it shows that it's a potential constraint, then we can point to different aspects of the municipal plan and say, look, this is a constraint that has to be taken seriously. I think that's the purpose of showing constraints. But I understand that can be confusing. But we've heard all the comment. We're not trying to ignore anything. We're trying to operate within the constraints of mapping and what the state terms categorizes as known versus possible constraints.
I actually was having a question for you, Steve. It seems that the adoption at this point of the plan would actually give more legal protection in the short term. Is that correct? In other words, if we don't, it seems that becomes more vulnerable legally, or is that, am I not understanding?
Well, it gives a substantial deference, and that's what I think the action tonight would be with a determination of energy compliance. Is the result is that if a case comes up before the Public Utility Commission, the municipality has this so-called substantial deference or a higher level of...
But if it's not approved, then they don't get the substantial deference. Is that correct? So in other words,
that's my understanding.
Yeah,
correct.
So it would maybe be prudent to approve it even if you have this serious concern, just in case, you know, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. It's sort of maybe the point that maybe I'm not getting.
I'm not sure whether we, go ahead, Joe.
Bill, and the determination of energy compliance, the draft, on items, procedural history number 6, it says Board of Commissioners reviewed the recommendations of the Town Plan Committee and voted to. The Town Plan Committee is recommending approval?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify.
Excuse me?
I just wanted to clarify that.
Right, yes, yeah. What I was going to say.
Byron?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the Waterbury Town Plan Incorporation of the approval again. I'm not going to have the words for this.
I was hoping you'd help me, because I'm not sure either, but I think you need to say something like determination of energy compliance.
That we approve the determination of energy compliance for the water town of Waterbury.
Right. Good enough?
I'll second that.
Don, I think, seconded first, so Byron
Perfectly fine.
made the motion.
Second first.
Don seconded. Is there any more discussion?
I just wanted to say, I can't remember whether we talked about it specifically or not, but it seems like we must have at some point there made a suggestion that Waterbury, once this is approved and therefore we have the substantial deference, et cetera, that they, once your plan is in, has been approved, you can go ahead at any time and make certain changes to it. And one of those could be to go ahead quickly and address making the Shutesville corridor more proof against development. But we didn't require or recommend that at the time, so it's just a thought.
Sorry, we need a little bit different motion.
Kind of friendly amendment here.
Or a second motion.
Or a second motion. I need approval to sign.
You need to vote on the first one, sorry.
Oh, okay.
sorry.
Got you.
So let's vote on the,
And the
vote on the
second
first.
part of the motion is approve the signature by the chair of the CVRPC's determination certificate.
Can I get a second?
A friendly amendment.
Okay. Are we good?
We're good.
Okay.
You can
Thank
do
you.
it in separate motions or together.
Okay.
Let's do it together.
Yeah, much easier.
You like together.
Thank you. So we have the motions. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All abstaining?
I'll abstain as long as we have a quorum.
You
too.
Okay, I'll
Okay.
abstain.
And I'm abstaining.
You're and Amy's going to abstain. Do we still have it?
Do you still have
Plus
quorum?
two.
You have quorum at the meeting.
But do we have the votes?
We have to have a
Two abstaining.
quorum worth of yeses. We're less two.
Assuming yeses, 1, 2, 3,
Yeah,
4,
pretty full here.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14,
Pizza's awesome.
15, 16. You would have 16 voting.
Okay.
Helps,
So
doesn't
the
it?
motion passes, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Next up is the municipal plan approval and confirmation of the planning process for the town of Middlesex. And Bill's going to tell us about that. Thank you, Bill.
So we met here before this meeting and looked at the Middlesex town plan. And Ron Krauss is here from Middlesex, and also a member of the Town Plan Review Committee, and Sandra Levine, who was also here, and we talked about the plan a fair amount and about Middlesex. But the essentials are that it's been recommended by Claire and her minions, whatever, or just Claire, that we recommend to the Commission that they approve both the plan and the process, the planning process. So at this point, Middlesex is not submitting an alternative energy plan, so it's just those two things that we're voting on.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the recommendation was for the provisional approval. The Middlesex Planning Commission has approved the plan and submitted it to the Select Board. The Select Board will be holding their hearing on the plan later in the month, and then they'll be having a townwide vote in August. And the reason why we worked with Middlesex to grant them a provisional approval ahead of the town adopting it is that they are seeking the approval ahead of the September 30th municipal planning grant application round. They had a grant submitted last year, but because they didn't have a town plan in place, were not eligible for that grant. And so they worked with a consultant to update their plan and have the desire to have everything in place ready for that September deadline. So we worked with them to help coordinate that. So the recommendation is to approve it provisionally based on the Select Board won't subsequently make any substantial changes. Staff will review that document to ensure that there were no substantial changes, so that then it will kind of default to sort of standard approval by early September.
Great. Any questions or discussion? Okay, yes?
Well, I was just going to ask, would it be one motion, or does it have to be two for the processing?
It looks like we can do it all in one motion.
It is at your pleasure. You are the board.
You can do it all in one motion, or you can have us do 2 or 3 motions, or... But I think basically what we need is laid out right under on the agenda in 3. Does that mean you're going to make it? Julie?
I'm going to try a long, complicated motion.
Yay!
Yay! I move that the board approve the town of Middlesex municipal plan pending adoption, that the board confirms the town of Middlesex planning process, and that the board approves the signature of the CVRPC resolution and certificate by the chair.
Thank you, Julie.
I'll second.
Thank you, Dara. So we have a motion by Julie, as said by Julie, and seconded by Dara. Is there any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Say nay. All abstaining. Thank you very much. The motion passes for the Middlesex plan. We are, just so you know, we're going to strike the item, the fiscal year work plan and budget, and I guess we're going to do that next time.
Assuming you want to go home at 8:30
Yeah.
rather than 9.
Okay, good, just so you don't start.
That was the plan.
Okay, so next up is the resolution on complying with Vermont open meeting law at page 27 of the packet.
So this is an annual resolution you pass in accordance with statute designating the time and place of regular meetings of the commission, or of regular meetings of the commission and committees. So it's the board, and then it's executive, project review, and the Transportation Advisory Committee are our regularly meeting committees. We have other committees whose meeting dates vary based on committee availability. And then statute basically says if you have a website, you must post agendas and minutes to your website. And then it's really pointed at municipalities. It says 3 other locations in the municipalities. So RPCs interpret that as your office and 2 other places in the region. In our case, the Cabot Town Clerk and the Waitsfield Town Clerk have graciously agreed to post our agendas in their offices for us. So the resolution designates those places as places people can go.
So the resolution is in your packet on that page on 27. I hope you don't really want me to read that whole thing. So I think what we need is just a motion adopting the resolution.
So moved.
Oh, second.
So we got Byron made the motion and Ron, or
Peter.
Okay. Seconded. Any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. All those abstaining, and the motion carries. Next is meeting minutes on page 48. Does anyone have any comments about the minutes?
Just a procedural question. I wasn't at the last meeting. Do I abstain or can I vote on the minutes?
You can actually vote on the minutes even if you weren't at the meeting.
Julie?
I've got 2 comments on the minutes on page 50 of the packet. Line 2. At the end of that line, the document is being revised by CVRPC attorney. The document is being reviewed by CVRPC attorney. And on line 10, I think there's a word that's missing. I think it should read, recommended changes will be incorporated into a new draft.
Yes, thanks. Anyone else? Would someone like to make a motion to approve the minutes of June 11th?
I move to approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
Okay. Julie made the motion and Bill Rand seconded. Julie made the motion and Bill Rand.
Thank you.
What's that?
That's good.
Oh, I thought you were
Then you ready?
Okay.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. If there's no more discussion or comments, would all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And all those abstaining. Motion carries and the minutes are approved. Last, I believe, we're not adding anything to the agenda.
I'm adding.
You're going to add one thing to the agenda, okay. You want to do the reports first or add?
Actually, no, I'm only adding to the reports.
Okay, go for it.
So supplemental information for staff reports is that Jonathan De La Bruyere, our emergency planner, tendered his resignation today. He has a number of part-time jobs in addition to a full-time job with CVRPC. One of his part-time jobs is with the town of Duxbury as their select board assistants. And it has been very difficult to keep his town job and CVRPC job separate from a potential conflict of interest perspective. So he has elected to continue with his town job, which he hopes will become full-time very shortly. And so he tendered to us today, and we sincerely appreciate his working for us, even though it's been a short time. He's been a great addition to the staff and team. We will be advertising position tomorrow, and with about a 2-week turnaround an open period, get in applications and try and get someone into the position very quickly. We have some ideas of people to recruit, to apply, but we'll have the open competition advertising on all our usual places. So for those of you who have been working, or your communities who have been working with Jonathan on emergency management projects, he will be here another 30 days, and in that time, we'll transition the projects to other staff members so that you maintain forward momentum and a person to talk to. So he was expressed that it's been a pleasure to work at CVRPC, had a very nice resignation letter, but it just wasn't working to have both positions together. So,
Best wishes to Jonathan.
best wishes to Jonathan, yes, we will miss him.
Does anyone else have any comments or question on the staff reports? Is that it here?
Unless you want me to do the other one, otherwise I won't. Oh, no, that was it for me.
That was it, okay. Anyone else have anything they want to add? Anyone want to make a motion to adjourn? Don has made a motion to adjourn. Who wants to second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
I'm ready.
Oh, we can't leave. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. All those abstaining. Thank you very much for all your help tonight.
How much is your rent now?